Okay, couple updates. Don't want to get too wrapped up in whatever I'm thinking, feeling, blah, 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 blah. Just want to actually highlight something good and positive, because Jesus. I had my talk with Paul Levy, the author of this book, Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil, and I got the experience that I needed to have, like, that I've been desperate, dying to have forever, which is just to be in the proximity of someone that could hold space for, what I really went through. Even though we didn't go into details, I didn't have to, because he's encountered the thing that I'm fucking talking about, and it's evident in how he talks about it. Like, you and I saw, encountered, and came to know the same thing, and almost were fucking killed by it. So, yeah, like, a part of my fucking being could, like, breathe, finally. And that's really good. And I made contact with someone else in the world that, like, we can speak a language. It's, like, allowed. It's official. I could fucking celebrate like it's my birthday. Like, the levee has fucking broken, and there's at least someone in the world that I have fucking access to that, like, I don't even have to try to speak the language, but at least we fucking can. And at the very least, even if we couldn't, he also gave me the gift of, just because of his experience, being able to validate my experience. And by validate, I mean not agree. I mean not discount it, not make me question it, not make me defend it, not consider it not possible, not be a no. Just allow it to be whatever it is, having even no opinion, but, like, there was extra in the energy, because, like, he could really say, yeah, me too, yeah, So, like, for the first time, I'm hearing, like, yeah, I totally, you know what I mean? I totally get it. Yep, whatever. So that's been great. I'm thinking about reducing my therapy and doing sessions with him, as opposed to doing as many therapy sessions. I've done my I've been doing weekly therapy for almost 2 years now, and that's been really helpful. But also, like, the thing that I know and have known for a long time is really needed is the thing that's, like, underneath it, and that's what I can address with Mr. Levy. So it's only like $25 more than BetterHelp is, so I'm just going to do twice monthly, like, meetings with this person, and do, like, therapy maybe twice monthly. So I'm still doing once a week, therapy essentially, but I think this is going to be really helpful. And I just went to a group called Cycle Breakers on BetterHelp. None of the other support groups, like, I feel like I have very niche needs, and not much accommodates that, but this I thought would come close, and it turns out there were even 2 other women in that group that were like, my mom's a narcissistic personality disorder, and my grandmother is too, and so that mirrored mine. And it was the first time I got to say in a room, just matter-of-factly, yeah, my mom has a narcissistic personality disorder, and so does my grandma, and, like, let it just exist as is, with no pushback energetically, like, in any way. It just, so again, sometimes there's healing in just, like, being in the presence of people that have gone through something similar to you. And so I'm trying to focus on that in this hard week with Gabe dying, and the family counseling with my mom and my brother coming up to, like, end things. Like, I'm just trying to stay focused on that. Shit feels hard, but anyways, I figured I would I didn't know that one of my favorite YouTube channels actually had Paul Levy on, and so we're gonna listen to the Higherside Chats podcast, and I'm only gonna do probably like listen to like half of it now, because I then am gonna shift gears and do wifey mode, more presently and focused. That's been my commitment, and so yeah, here we go.
We've seen the trend for a long time now, but each new year seems to have kicked it up a notch and only exacerbated the thought of, well, I didn't expect it to get this bad. Enter the COVID era, and we've been getting a cosmic masterclass in the illogical actions of a people fueled by fear, selfishness, anger, and all the ingredients in the worst soup of human emotions. And with all the great conversations we've had about unseen spiritual influences and the great earth play, you'd certainly expect them to be involved here as well, and it seems they've been juicing up. But this isn't just the wild speculation of a few rogue scholars, because many of the brightest minds in nearly every previous or indigenous culture on this human energy farm has sensed these beings of darkness and warned against their influence. The Gnostics called them archons, Rudolf Steiner called them Lucifer and Ahriman, Carl Jung called it the shadow, and some just refer to trickster spirits. But in every religion, spiritual tradition, and even grimoire, you'll find warnings against the influence of nefarious beings from the other side. Well, Wetiko is the term used by many of the Algonquin-speaking tribes of North America and the preferred term of today's guest, Paul Levy. Over 40 years ago, Paul had a life-transforming spiritual awakening experience that would likely be considered a call to a shamanic path in many other cultures. But in ours, it was diagnosed as a psychotic break, and he was repeatedly hospitalized and told he was mentally ill. The abuse he subsequently received from psychiatry destroyed his family and almost killed him. But he has emerged from the other side as a spiritual teacher, healer, and author of several great books, including Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil, Awakened by Darkness, When Evil Becomes Your Father, Quantum Revelation, A Radical Synthesis of Science and Spirituality, and hitting the shelves by the time this hits your ears, his latest book is called Wetiko, Healing the Mind Virus That Plagues Our World. And if you ask me, this is definitely the right time and place to examine just such a thing. You can find more of Paul's work and his personal practice at awakeninthedream.com, and it is a pleasure to have him here. The enlightening educator and mind virus transmutator, holding back the wild and stormy waters of Wetiko, Paul Levy, welcome to the higher side.
Hi, yeah, I'm just so happy to be here with you, Greg, today. Thank you.
Yeah, man, likewise, and thanks for doing it, because I've gotten several requests to have you on over the last couple of years, and I'm glad we are making it happen in the COVID era, because the need for it has never been more obvious. Of course, very few people are thinking about all the COVID operation aspects in a spiritual context, but as the saying goes, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world he didn't exist. And so for our culture, which is largely ignorant of such things, this sort of material seems more important than ever, wouldn't you say?
Oh, completely. I mean, you know, I've been talking for 25 years about that we're in the middle of a collective psychosis, and a lot of people would just scratch their head wondering what made me think that. And it's become obvious. I mean, you know, it couldn't be more obvious that our species has fallen into a collective madness, that we're acting out on the world stage. And if we don't come to terms with it, you know, it's clear we're killing ourselves. We're destroying the biosphere, the life support system of this planet. And I'm in a particularly interesting position because, like you had said in the intro, over 40 years ago, I had this breakdown, like a huge spiritual awakening that propelled me so completely out of consensus reality.
Me too.
Things began happening in my life that weren't just, you know, synchronistic or amazing. They were physically impossible.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but something was actually being shown to me. And I was beginning to realize the dreamlike nature of reality. But while that was happening, concurrent with that, I kept on being hospitalized and told, oh, I'm crazy and I've gotten mentally ill. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that wasn't true. And that's what saved me. And so here I am, fast forward 40 years later, and I'm, you know, one of the people who's able to diagnose and point out the collective madness that we've fallen into. And, you know, like I'm saying, if we don't really come to terms, it's revealing something to us that's most important for us to know. And if we don't have the realization of that, then we're doomed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well said. We are off to the races. And so, from the intro of your new book, you say, Wetiko in a nutshell, a contagious psycho-spiritual disease of the soul, a parasite of the mind. It is currently being acted out en masse on the world stage via an insidious collective psychosis of titanic proportions. And that is a great way to get people excited about the concept of Wetiko. And it seems like there's an almost limitless way of explaining or getting at what this is and different angles to come at it. But what else would you say about introducing folks to this influence?
Sure. Well, it's so funny because, I've had some people, they'll accuse me of, oh, you're just really out there and woo-woo and new agey. And the radical thing I'm saying in my work is that the origin, the very source of the problem that's creating all of the myriad world crises and the source of the solution of those problems is to be found within the psyche. That's the radical thing I'm saying. And think about it, collective madness, the source of that is our psyche. And so the thing about Wetiko, it's a psycho-spiritual disease of the soul, but it's quantum in nature. And what I mean by that is that encoded within the pathology, because it's the source
is the medicine
of all the evil we're playing out in the world, but
100%.
encoded, hidden within the pathology is its own vaccine, is its own medicine. But if we don't have the recognition of what it's revealing to us, it's going to kill us. But if we have the recognition of, oh, something is being shown to us, something in our unconscious, then all of a sudden it connects us with ourselves in a deeper way. It unlocks the most incredible creative agency. That's our nature that we all have, but we don't know we have it. And so, one way of understanding Wetiko is because we're unconscious of our nature, of our creative power and our creative nature, then that creative spirit gets turned against us. And I can say a lot more about that because the thing about Wetiko, it has no creativity at all, but it plugs into our creativity if we're unawake to it, and then it turns our own creative nature against us to serve its agenda.
Yep.
And that's why so many people are acting out stuff in their lives, whether individually through addictions or supporting politicians who are actually supporting policies that are actually not serving them. So many people are investing their energy in ways that aren't serving them. What's at the bottom of that is the Wetiko bug.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I also had this in my notes that I like, where you say it covertly operates through the unconscious blind spots in the human psyche, rendering people oblivious to their own madness and compelling them to act against their own best interests.
100%.
Wetiko is a psychosis in the true sense of the word. It bewitches our consciousness so that we become blind to the underlying assumed viewpoint through which we perceive, conjure up, and give meaning to our experience of both the world and ourselves.
First of all, takeaway, so important to distill it so easily. Having something impact you, working through you, that is working against your best interest. That is really important. Yeah. It is not working for the person's own best interest, and not the best interest of other people. But yeah, it was all good.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well said. I guess elaborate on that a little bit more.
Right, I was thinking, God, I couldn't have said it better myself. But no, that's really it. Because Wetiko, it's a form of blindness. But it's a really peculiar form of blindness because it's a type of blindness that does not know that it's blind.
Yep.
And not only does it not know that it's blind,
it thinks it sees.
It thinks it's actually sighted. And not only does it think it's sighted, it thinks it's more sighted than people who are actually seeing. And so Wetiko, it's an all-around blindness in that it's blind to that it's blind. It's blind, it can't see its own. When somebody's afflicted with, the person can't see their own shadow and their own darkness. And they also can't see their own light.
Yep.
So Wetiko, it kind of takes away our ability to see, particularly in the way that's most important, in that we can't see it. It hides in our blind spots.
Yep.
And the thing about Wetiko, not only does it hide in our blind spots, but it operates through the projective tendencies of our mind. And we're always projecting. We're projecting onto the waking inkblot of this world. And when we project, we interpret. We have this meaning that we superimpose onto what's happening. And the thing is, though, because this reality is dreamlike, as soon as we interpret this waking ink blot in a certain way, similar to how a dream, think about what a dream is. A dream is a projection of the mind. It's reflecting the mind. As soon as we interpret the ink blot of the dream in a certain way, instantaneously, not over time, but in zero time, the dream, being a reflection of our mind, instantaneously reflects back our interpretation, which confirms to us, oh, what we're seeing is objectively true. So we become even more fixed in our viewpoint, and the more fixed in whatever the viewpoint is, the more the dream just reflects it back. And basically, we've hypnotized ourselves, thinking that what we're seeing is objectively true. And as soon as we think the world is objective, we've created ourselves as a subject that's separate from the object of the world. And that's Watiko, because then we've literally hypnotized ourselves. We've entranced ourselves. And I'm describing that in a night dream, but it totally maps on to the waking dream. And what I'm describing, this is what quantum physics has discovered. Because quantum physics is offering us the medicine for Watiko. Mm-hmm. So I can just say a lot more about this, but it's all based on this reality being a shared collective dream. And that's what I was realizing 40 years ago when I was thrown in hospitals and told I was mentally ill.
Right on. Yes, that was exactly the next thing I wanted to ask you about, was the structure of reality, because we got to zoom out to give people context and put Watiko within the larger framework. We're talking about dreams and spirits and consciousness and the physical plane. You mentioned the field in the book a fair amount. Help people get a handle on how these things fit together into a holistic worldview and relate to each other.
Sure. Well, the field, Albert Einstein has a famous quote where he's saying the field is the only reality, or I'm paraphrasing, but that's very close. And the field, for example, quantum physics has discovered, empirically proved, I mean, there's no doubt that this cosmos being quantum in nature, that means that there's no separate parts interacting. It's all seamlessly whole.
Independent, Mom.
You know, there's no separation.
It's all connected.
So the field is not localized, it's a non-local, which means it transcends third-dimensional space and time,
yes,
where every part of the non-local field is interconnected with every other part because they're not separated in space or in time. And it's only when you begin, you know, there are these ways that I describe how to see Watiko, because the whole point is to see Watiko. Because if we don't see it, then it operates through our blind spots.
Yep.
And then we unwittingly become an instrument for it to act itself out in the world.
What was I doing in 2016? What were all those exercises? That's what I was doing. You know, the only other person that saw Watiko? It's my brother. Wah, wah, wah. Also, it's just crazy to hear somebody talk about it so plainly, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I call blah blah, like, because we had to come up with our own fucking language to describe what the fuck we were experiencing. It's so crazy. Yeah.
Productively serving its agenda as it kills us, and that's what's happening in the world. So one of the ways to see Watiko is to have the recognition that there's a non-local field in which we're all contained and of which we're all expressions. And to begin to see that is to begin to snap out of the imagination of the separate self. Because if you remember, I was saying as soon as we think the world exists objectively, then we concurrently conjure ourselves up as a subject that's in relationship to the object, and all of a sudden there's a duality. And as soon as we identify with a separate self, there's others. And as soon as there's others, there's fear. And fear is the superfood for Watiko. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the point is, in the non-local field, seeing through the imagination of the separate self and having the recognition that we don't exist as separate selves, that we exist, we're interdependent with each other, We're interconnected with each other. There is no separate self. And that is, in a sense, equivalent to seeing the non-local field. And one other way of describing it, it's like three aspects of the same deeper sort of this gem that are all part of the same jewel, is to actually see the dreamlike nature. Because when you see the dreamlike nature, like say if you're in a night dream.
Okay, he kind of loses me on the dreamlike nature. I mean, obviously this is a way that he's been able to encapsulate it and make it all make sense for him. But I think, like, you have to be really adept in understanding that, because, like, even for me, it's tough to grasp. I can sense it, but I can't, like, grab onto it. And so I just want to say the whole thing about the non-local field, yeah, like, I experienced that, and I called it, what did I call it? The unified field. That's what I called it. I didn't know what else to call it. But that's what he calls it, the field. So I guess we both did call it the field. That place where you are super aware and you can see that you are both the individual and the collective at the same time, and it's all connected. Your organic, fucking, spontaneous, free-forming, independent life is also alongside the collective having that same experience, but all of that is working together symbiotically, like simultaneously, and that it can be affected. It can be affected because of that is wild, but that's what he's talking about.
And you have awareness that you're dreaming. What do you see? You recognize that all the other characters in the dream are just aspects of you, that there's no separation. And so to see the dreamlike nature, to see through the imagination of the separate self, and to see the non-local field, those are ways of describing when you're beginning to snap out of the spell of Watiko. Because Watiko, before I found the name Watiko, I had written a book, and I was talking about Watiko, but I didn't know the name. I called it Malignant Egophrenia, M-E disease, me disease. It's a misidentification of who we think we are. And that's, in essence, Watiko.
Well, on the subject of the names for it, I did mention a couple of analogs in the intro, like Archons or Young's Shadow, but maybe you can talk to us a bit more about the cross-cultural references to a being like this, because they're everywhere, right?
Yeah. And that's in my new book, the one that's just coming out. I mean, that's one of the major parts of the book, is I'm pointing out that in every spiritual tradition, every single one, from time immemorial, they're pointing at Watiko. But they're not using the name Watiko, they're calling it a different name.
Yep.
And creative artists and philosophers and thinkers, they're all pointing at Watiko. So it's not important what the name is, but the idea is, you know, by finding the name, like in a fairy tale, and then you're objectifying it, then you see it, then you take away its power over you. So it's important to just, whatever name suits us, to call this, it's like this parasite of the mind. Now, in the apocryphal texts, they talk about Watiko, they call it the counterfeiting spirit. But it was edited out of the Bible. And I point out in my book that, well, that's because Watiko was on the editorial board of the Bible, because it can't stand to be exposed. Now, the counterfeiting spirit that is Watiko, here's its strategy. What it does, it actually, like I was saying, it has no creativity, but it's a master impersonator.
Yeah.
So it puts us on.
Yep.
And putting us on has
like
two
a suit.
meanings. It's like putting us on like a suit of clothes.
Yep.
But putting us on means to fool us. It's the trickster. So it presents us with this image of ourselves, this limited version of ourselves, or this grandiose version of ourselves. But it presents us not with the real self, but with a fictitious version of ourselves.
False
Because
self.
the thing about Watiko, it has no power over us whatsoever, as long as we're actually connected with who we are, with our true nature. Then it can't touch us. So
Important. He's talking about one of the antidotes to keeping it out is being connected to your true self, aka in alignment, coherent, whatever your perfect pitch soul frequency is. And so, starting to make sense? why like Dov's song Pure Expression was like the perfect anthem for it. Like, pure expression's my profession, bitch. Like, the practice is to be true to who you are, where you're at, what is going on, like, as much as possible. Like, whatever it is, just be true to you and feed the things, like, yeah, because that is part of what keeps it at bay. So, same thing with telling the motherfucking truth.
What its strategy is, it impersonates us. It offers us a simulation of who we are. And if we're not awake in that moment and we identify with its fictitious version of ourselves, then it has